Okay, this is now the tarot process part 32. And I've got the mic here because when it was over there, there was a hum and it was feedback and I couldn't figure out what to do, so I moved it. Just in case you're wondering why I'm changing things around. Okay, so this is part 32 and it's about the Fool. And it began, I think it's clear that I'm interested in the tarot and I sort of want to know more about it all the time, but I don't spend like hours at a time figuring out the tarot, but I sort of try to pay attention to what I notice and what comes to me. It's a bit like Vinny. Remember Vinny the drummer? And he says you practice something, then you forget about it, but then you discover maybe 2 months later you're playing this thing that you practice because it came back when it was appropriate or when it was suitable for the music that he was playing. So with me in the tarot, I'm sort of always I know that I want to know about the tarot, but I don't spend hours trying to figure it out. But I do pay attention when I notice things. This is what the next video is going to be about, but for this one. So I was on YouTube and I happened to notice there was a title, Joe Rogan interviewing Jordan-Peterson. I never watched Joe Rogan, and Jordan I like because he's a Gemini and because he's like a journalist and he's a shortcut because he reads the books and tells you what they're about, which means you don't need to spend the time reading the book. And he's quite good at giving you important points from any particular book. So the video was called, I can't remember, The Secret to Unlocking Your Potential, a hidden secret to unlocking your potential, something like that. I'll put a link down below. And so I saw this title and I thought that could be interesting. And then it was only 4 minutes or 4.5 minutes. I thought I'll watch it. And so Jordan made 8 points, and I had to write them down so I can remember them, because he talks about how at a certain point or on the journey that we're of life, occasionally, or there are times when you've got to rescue your father from the belly of the whale in Pinocchio or in other stories. It's quite a common idea. So you have to rescue the father from the abyss, right? The bottomless pit, the bottomless depth. And that's the Fool. There's the Fool about to step off a cliff into who knows what, who knows where. He doesn't know. He's taking a chance. But is he going to survive the fall? Or is he going to damage himself and be unable to get back to where he wanted to go? Or is he going to find he's in the depths and he's lost? And that's maybe the chance that we take. So the idea is that periodically or at certain times in life, you're meant to rescue your father who's trapped in a monster or in the abyss. So I've got various points to make, and it's basically all about the Fool. So point number one is, that Jordan mentions, is if you set a goal and take steps towards achieving that goal, you get positive emotion. And that's something you can build on. Because a lot of times we do things and we get miserable because of it. But he says if you set a goal and figure out where you want to go, or what would be valuable to you to have or to achieve, and you actually take steps to get there, then you feel good about it. You feel good about yourself and about what you're doing. And that's something you can build on. So because setting a goal leads and taking action to achieve that goal gives you positive emotion, you might as well set a really big goal. You know what I mean? Instead of I want to move house, what you do is I want to move to a mansion. You know what I mean? It's like with a swimming pool and a 2-car garage and a nice garden. You might as well, if we get back what we give out, which is what I've been saying recently. So if you're giving out, I want a big mansion and people and a couple of cars and a swimming pool and a fulfilling lifestyle, that's what you're asking for, and the universe is going to give it to you. Maybe not tomorrow, but you're moving in that direction. So you might as well set a big goal I think I mentioned a while ago about what path are you on. Think about how the quality of your life relates to the path that you've chosen, right? Because you want to, let's say, do well, whatever well might mean, but you also don't want to be poor at the same time. So we're not supposed to be poor. Anyway, okay, so part of taking steps to achieve your goal can cause you to be afraid, right? There's a certain amount of fear involved in learning something new or doing something you've never done before, right? And this can be part of what's involved with the full card when it comes up in a reading. That maybe you have to, with the questioner, you have to talk about what are you maybe afraid of, and how are you going to handle the fact that you're afraid to do public speaking, let's say, or you're afraid to do a presentation, let's say at work, right? You've got a promotion and now you have to do presentations to people, or how are you going to become a supervisor, that you've got to tell people off, or you've got to get them to obey the rules and they don't want to, and they make excuses. How are you going to handle that kind of person or that kind of situation? So there can be fear involved. And when there's fear, it can stretch you, right? So you have to become a little bit bigger in order to handle the fear. So Jordan's a clinical psychologist, which is a specialized field. And so he mentions somebody whose name I can't remember, who says when somebody's kind of paralyzed by a fear, something that works in a particular branch of psychology, I think it's called cognitive behavior or something like that. So what you do is you break down the problem or the solution into the smallest possible step. So an example that I knew about was, let's say somebody's really afraid of elevators and they can't figure out why. So what you do is you break it down into, instead of trying to force them into an elevator, they'll just panic and freak out. So what you do is you sit them in a room and you get them, and you say elevator, and you get them used to the fact that you can actually mention the word elevator and they don't panic. And then as they get used to that, you then take them into the hallway and show them a closed elevator door for 1 second and then back away. And so you take tiny little steps, but you gradually build up. And so I wrote down, there's a fellow called David Allen who wrote a book called Getting Things Done. And David is very popular, translated into multiple languages. And he's big on figuring out what's the next actionable step that you can take. And so that's what you focus on. So an example he gave in a talk was somebody wanted to go on holiday, and so what's the next step? Okay, decide where I want to go. That's not the next step. And so it ended up being the person's kept zeroing in on the situation and said, I need to call the travel agent. This is before the internet, but I need to call the travel agent. And David Allen said, that's not the next step. The next step is get the travel agent's telephone number. And that's something you can do. And you do that and you're well on your way to the other steps. So there's something about figuring out what's the next actionable step that you can take and doing that. And forget about the big picture, because, not forget about it, but understand that you're on your way to dealing with the big picture. So it's a bit like, if you take small steps like that to solve a problem or to go about dealing with a problem, you become bigger, right? You do something, you learn something from it, you become bigger. And if you've ever lifted weights, you build muscle. But what happens, you lift the weight, there's small tears in the muscle, and as the tear heals, the muscle becomes bigger. So you build muscle by causing destruction. And in the same way, you make yourself bigger as a person by challenging yourself or putting yourself into situations that are a little bit stressful and dealing with it anyway. Instead of giving up or backing away or not trying in the first place, you face it and you deal with it. And Jordan says, what happens with people is not that they become less fearful, but they become more brave. And that could be something you point out to somebody who gets the fool. If you get the fool, you've got the chance to become more brave. Maybe the fool reversed is you're fearful. So you figure out different ways to handle the fear. But just that idea about not becoming less fearful, but becoming more brave, I think is a good one. And the clincher, the thing that got me started was that right near the end, where he talks about how if you make yourself take steps that are going to get you to where you want to go, and if you make an effort and try it and dare yourself to do it, what you do is you unlock genetic potential, which I think is just a phenomenal idea, that you become bigger because you've got this genetic potential. You've got genes that have got memory and they've got understanding. And maybe most of it is hidden from us. But by putting yourself in a stressful situation, we unlock the knowledge that is contained within the genes. And you also renew and revitalize your nervous system, because you're making neural connections. I don't understand the science of it, but it's probably true what he's talking about. And it reminded me of John Bergman, this chiropractor on YouTube, who talked about how our ancestors, your ancestors and my ancestors, survived the plague, right? Because if they hadn't survived the plague, they wouldn't have been able to reproduce and get to us eventually. So we've got contained within our genetic inheritance the ability to handle the plague or any kind of mass disease or pandemic. This is partly maybe why I'm mentioning it just now. We contain within our genes the ability or the knowledge required to do anything that any human being has ever done. And so by trying something, you unlock genetic potential. And so if the full card comes up in the present, then the questioner has the chance to become bigger and more knowledgeable and more informed and build on something and become happier. If the full card appears in the future, you will become bigger if you do what you're supposed to do, or if you follow through on your own motivations or on your own desires to go in a certain direction. I think that's partly, so that's a kind of thing to think about, or that could be some of the things to think about about the full card and when it comes up in a reading. So you talk to the questioner about facing fear, about becoming bigger, about the value of becoming bigger and stronger and more informed and more knowledgeable, and how you're going to go about it, and the fact that it takes courage, a certain amount of courage or foolhardiness, maybe because it's the fool. Take a risk, take a chance, and if the fool is upright, you take it, the chance. If the fool is upside down, you maybe need to be talked into it, or maybe now is not quite the time to do this thing that you're afraid of. So maybe you leave it till later. Whereas if the fool appears in the future, you will become bigger. And that could be why, so that could be something that the reader talks about to encourage the questioner to do things now and in the future, so that later they become more knowledgeable. And the other point that Jordan makes at the beginning that I'll save it to the end is, when you decide what direction you want to go in or what you want to do, there's an element of sacrifice involved as well, because if I'm going to do this, it means I can't do that and the other thing. So there's a certain amount of sacrifice involved when you commit to a particular course of action. So let's say I want to learn German. I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day learning German. That's 15 minutes a day that I can't do, that I can't use, I don't know, watching television or doing something else, lying on the couch or sleeping. right? So I have to sacrifice sleeping, let's say, or lying on the couch or doing nothing so that I can learn German. And that can be involved with the full as well. So if the full card comes up, yes, it's exciting and interesting, it's got great potential, but be aware of what you're giving up as well. Because if you're aware of what you're giving up and you don't mind giving it up because it's for your own greater good, that means that if you start doing this thing that you want to do and then you realize, wait a minute, I'm not able to do that anymore, that can get you off track or it can set you back. But if you go into the new future knowing that temporarily anyway you're going to have to give up this thing that you enjoy, then you don't mind because you've thought it through and you've understood it. Okay, so that was something about the Fool card, and next is going to be about mathematics and numbers and so on. But I have to do it slightly differently, and it's taken me longer to get together, and that's why I'm doing this as sort of introducing this instead of what I meant to do. I'm rambling. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you in a few days. Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.